Good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's Ar Respire Connosco event. I am Daniel Nunes. I'm a researcher here at the Champalimaud Centre for the Unknown, and together with Liado Lander, here in the audience, we organized this event in collaboration with Maratona da Saúde. We focused our event to show you a relationship between basic research and clinical research, taking the case example of neurodegenerative disorders. So I would like to start by challenging you with a question. What's the point of scientific research? Any comments on that? Does anyone want to say something? Some ideas over there, maybe? No? OK, you are quite shy. So I'm going to give you a little help. Is it to understand the origin of life, or is it to find a cure for cancer? On the other hand, is it to understand the laws of gravity, or is it to prevent Alzheimer's disease? Well, the answer is actually yes to all of these questions. But one here can categorize scientific research at two levels. One of the levels would be clinical research, while the other would be basic research. Clinical research is actually the type of research that we relate ourselves very tightly with, because it's the one that takes care of our health. On the other side, the basic research asks fundamental questions for us to understand the world we live in. So how do we go now from here? Well, here you have a composite from two images. One half is from a normal person, and the other half is from a patient with Alzheimer's disease. As you can see, the amount of white substance in the Alzheimer's patient is really reduced. And also, the ventricle, this part here, is actually increased. You can see it better now. But in order for us to get this type of information that we call anatomical information, actually, it is possible to do only post-mortem. So we need to open the skull, take the brain out, and make slices of it. Yet, nowadays, we have ways to look and get this information without touching a person. This type of image we also might be familiar with. These are images of magnetic resonance imaging that are taken from living people, and we do not need to do a single cut to get them and actually gather exactly the same type of information as we have here from these anatomical images. So the next question is then, what is magnetic resonance imaging at all? Well, this type of machines you might be actually have seen once in your lifetime. And the formal definition of magnetic resonance imaging says that MRI is a method that uses a magnetic field and pulses of radio wave energy to make pictures of organs and structures inside the body. Quite complicated, huh? But, well, what it wants to say us is that we use properties, physical properties that we call magnetic field, and we can make just pictures of inside the body of living people. And we can use many other stuff. I mean, archaeological discoveries and so on can be analyzed with this method. But was it that this method was thought to be just a clinical tool? Did it appear, or someone thought in developing this to be on the hospitals and clinics? Well, the answer to this is no. This method has a very long story that now I'm going to tell you a bit about. I will start with someone not related to physics at all. It is a mathematician, Jean Fourier, who in 1822, he just described an amount of equations that we nowadays know as Fourier transform. In the same century as his, there were some just scientists who described laws of electromagnetism, like Michael Faraday, James Maxwell, and Nikola Tesla, among others. Yet, we still have no clue about the nuclear magnetic fields, resonance. And around this time, Joseph Larmor actually described the Larmor Formula, which is, in the end, something that tells us how does atomic nuclei behave under a magnetic field. And for that, of course, he needed these laws of electromagnetism. An experimentalist, Isidor Rabi, in 1937, was the first one describing the nuclear magnetic resonance principle. Rabi's work was actually only possible because of all of these basic research discoveries. But until now, we do not have an image. And Rabi was actually awarded with the Nobel Prize in 1944. And 1 year later, 1945, two other scientists independently, Edward Purcell and Francis Bloch, did the first one-dimensional images of magnetic resonance. Well, this is how their images look like. These are not really two-dimensional images. They have only one dimension, and they are kind of chemical signatures of the substances that they imaged, paraffin and water. And so how did it go now from this type of signatures, or spectra, as we call them, to a two-dimensional image? Here I need to do a shortcut in history, because it gets quite complicated over the 60s, where many scientists, many labs around the world, were actually trying to make a 2D image. This is Paul Lothebor and Peter Mansfield. And they were one of the first who got two-dimensional images using MRI. These two scientists, among other things, one of the first things that they imaged were peanuts. And they were able to image the oil inside of the peanuts. But how is it that now we come here from a one-dimensional image to something with two dimensions? Well, what was necessary to do it was change a little bit the way we acquired these, and we needed something that Fourier invented about 150 years before. So at this point, of course, that the scientists understood the powerful of this technique, and they knew that it could have a huge amount of application in clinics. And actually, Raymond Damadian was one of the first who did an MRI that would suit humans. And, of course, as many times in science, the first attempts are failures. In this case, because the subject was too fat. Well, luckily, he had another postdoc in his lab. And Larry fitted better inside, and the world came to see the first human MRI image ever. Yet, I would like to call your attention that this was not the first image produced using MRI. It was the first human image produced. Of course, that they described their achievement as a fantastic success, because they were able to image the chest of a person. So I hope that you have understood that there is a quite big time gap between the first discoveries of nuclear magnetic principles and, in the other end, the first human images. Actually, Isidor Rabi, shortly before he died, was imaged in one of the MRI machines. He described his experience as, it was a re. I saw myself in that machine, and I never thought my work would come to this. And now, again, we come to these fancy images that are familiar to us, and I have described how can we get them. But is it that nowadays we use MRI as a technique only in the clinics, only in the hospitals? Well, the answer is no. This is me here, me there. And this is behind me in the photo, the MRI machine that I work with. I'm a basic scientist, and I ask questions like, how does the brain work? How do we make decisions? But also, I try to develop new MRI techniques. And you can here see a picture of a rat spinal cord, because I work with models, and I do not work with persons. This image that shows you that it is possible, using a new technique, to segment the spinal cord in different regions using certain physical properties of the biological tissue. So, is it really important for us to care about all of these questions if there is so many diseases that still we need to find a cure for? The answer is yes for two reasons. One of the reasons is because the human being is always trying to understand the world we live in. Like from looking in the furthest galaxies in our universe, to understand the teeniest particles that the matter is made of, or to understand the basis of life, or even to understand the nature of emotions or feelings or our thoughts, our decisions. Also, it does change us as a society. Here in this image, you see that the Earth is not in the center. And nowadays, for us, this is kind of logical. But can you imagine the revolution it was at the time that it was described that the Earth was not in the center of the universe, and most of the people was not doing science? The second reason is, and I hope that I have showed it to you with the MRI history, is that we never know where basic research is going to lead us to. So it is really important for us to keep asking questions and understand the world we live in order to make discoveries that can actually be applied sometime much later, sooner, to our daily life. And in turn, in our case, clinical research is actually good to give new inputs to basic research in order for us to fine-tune our questions. So in the end, there is a link between basic research and clinical research that many times is not really obvious for us. I think that the words of George Smoot, a Nobel Prize for Physics in 2006, quite well summarize what I'm telling to you. He said that people cannot foresee the future well enough to predict what's going to develop from basic research. If we only did applied research, we would still be making better spears. Today's event is going to start with Joaquim Alves da Silva, that is going to tell us about past breakthroughs in basic science that were important to change clinical research. Also, he's going to tell about innovative tools that are used in basic research that might be actually the future of clinical research. Our second speaker, Professor Durval Costa, is going to tell us about radiopharmaceuticals and how did they came from basic research to today's applications in clinic. Also, after this event, outside, as you have had the opportunity to see while coming in, there are a set of scientists here from the Champalimaud Foundation that you can interact with and actually do your own questions to them and also understand what are they doing. Moreover, you have two other organizations, Danshard com Parkinson and Patient Innovation, that are there to show their work with the society. But before that, we are going to hear some words from Professor António Coutinho from Maratona da Saúde. Thank you for your attention.